The Kenyan film industry is being buffeted by piracy, and you won't believe the amount of money they are losing daily as a result of that. And also, California is doubling down on its incentive in order to reel back in productions from Hollywood and America as a whole that are being shot outside the country. This and more is what we are going to discover right here on this very episode of the Film Mandate right on YouTube. My name is Papa Otu. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the Film Mandate, where I bring to you movie reviews, news, and reactions both from the African front and the international scene. Thank you for joining me for this very episode, and we'll be delving right into the stories. An amazing discovery, very mind blowing, is a story from the Kenyan film industry. And just a couple of this actually was published in 2024, but I thought the story here was is very, I mean, incredible that we need to talk about it, and particularly the amount of money they are losing daily as a result of piracy. And as you can see on the screen, Kenya is losing $2.2 million a day to piracy. And they discussed the challenges, opportunities for African distributors. And this happened at a conference in Cologne, Germany, with regards to, and that was when this challenge was made known at the forum or the summit to be specific. So I read Kenya is losing $2.2 million a day to piracy, challenges, opportunities for African distributors in Spotlight. And this is written by Martin Blaney in the Screen Daily tabloid. So the debate took place at the International Film Distribution Summit in Cologne. In Cologne. I don't know what's happened to. Okay, let me just refresh it. I don't know why they are now requesting that I sign in, because I read the whole article earlier on, and then now that I'm ready to read it, it seems to have vanished in thin air. Anyway, for some reason, it's not showing up. So we'll just yeah, go in. So this article highlighted some of the challenges the Kenyan industry is facing. And at this very summit, they talked about how the industry is plagued with piracy to the extent that they had to, you know, films, people can just walk into several of one of several movie stores, so to put it, where they can just go with a pen drive and copy movies from this store, so download movies onto these pen drives and then come home and slot it into their TV sets and then watch it. And as a result of that, they are losing serious money, because these are films that could have been sold on DVDs or whichever disc as it is, or even be streamed digitally online. But unfortunately, the country is plagued with such that a lot of these movie stores copy these on pen drives and or retrieve, I mean, any drives that they may find in order to go and watch at home. And this is causing problem, because then it means that majority of these production houses or the right holders to these IPs are not able to get money directly from these films that they have produced. And they also went further to explain the challenge they are facing now, and that the challenge they are facing is as a result of the fact that majority of the what's it called, the cinemas they have, the slates that are being shown, in terms of the slates of films that are being shown, are mainly, what's it called, they are mainly films from foreign countries. So you have Hollywood films and Bollywood films due to the massive population of Indians in the country. And I thought it was quite interesting, even though they didn't really address the issue of how that can be solved, because then it went to a point where now only 1% of their films actually are being shown on the screens. I think let me just read a little bit of the article off screen so that we can take a look at it. Yeah, so let me just read a little bit of the article in my browser just for you to get a deeper understanding of the challenges they are facing. Oh, it seems to have just logged me out completely. Yeah, but so the challenge they are facing is very enormous due to the fact that the even in their own cinemas, their films are not being shown. And I could understand the cinema owners not being so concerned about it, or maybe even if they are concerned, they can't do much about it because there's the challenge where they have to generate revenue in order to keep the cinemas running. So it looks like in that case, the challenge may be that perhaps even the indigents, the Kenyans themselves, don't go in to watch these films made by their own people, and that is a challenge. But from the look of things, I believe that perhaps the governments of the day need to find a way of incentivizing the film industries by the citizens so that and put in place certain policies to encourage filmmaking by Kenyans for Kenyans, because it is quite unbelievable to have cinema chains in a country that are not showcasing content by Kenyans. And to this level, it's quite unprecedented. Pardon me, I hope I'm getting the numbers right, but perhaps even on a later date, I may be able to provide the exact figures if necessary. But to that unprecedented scale, it is indeed mind blowing. It's mind blowing to the extent that if you would need if if then they are losing $2.2 million to piracy, the government of the day needs to put in place measures to curb this canker. It is indeed a big problem. So what they have resorted to is more or less find ways of putting their content on streaming of a sort. And streaming in itself is not bad, but the challenge with streaming is that most of the monies generated by streaming service are not necessarily directly related to the film that are being shown. Yes, you can provide data that ascribe to the fact that people sort of subscribe to the services because of a film to watch due to it could be determined in that way, but generally the streaming service revenue generation is based on subscriptions, and it means that if new people don't join or subscribe onto a streaming service and watch them, it means that literally you're not making money, and the revenue must be split among the number of films or content that are being watched at a particular time on a streaming service within a month. So it is indeed a challenge if, I mean, looking at the fact that Kenyans are losing this much money to the to piracy, and I don't know how they were able to determine or provide the data for this. But whatever the case may be, it is indeed a challenge, and it's really indeed sad and disheartening to find out that the Kenyan industry, particularly the natives, are losing this much money. And I for one believe that there is the need to have a continental network of our cinemas and film markets in order to help show up the challenges that individual industries in their countries may be facing, that can be sort of solved or ameliorated a little bit by screening across Africa. Because this $2.2 million could indeed help boost the industry in Kenya so much so that they wouldn't have to face this challenge. But looking at the severity of the challenge they are facing in the country, indeed there is the need for the government and perhaps the agency in charge of film in the country to find a way of solving this problem. It can't be allowed to continue. If Kenyans want to build their film industry, the government of the day ought to put in policy to bridge the gap they are facing. Particularly, I would use an example that was done in this country a couple of years ago. A former president brought about, that is to be specific, in Ghana. Yeah, I'm speaking from Ghana. So a president, a former president, saw a challenge. His government and the MPs at the time saw a challenge that the music industry was facing, where a lot of the music that are being played on the airwaves, on radios, are mostly foreign. So they instituted a policy where local content or local music, 70% of local music will be played as against 30% of foreign music. And that helped the industry. So a similar thing can be done where, particularly in the cinemas, they can find a way of bringing about a balance. But the challenge would always be, would people go and watch in the first place? And secondly, would would how, I mean, being a private business, can you regulate it in that manner? I really don't know, but there have to be a way where the cinemas would also create an avenue for local content to be played. And also, the challenge would also be that, are the films quality enough to even attract the Indian expatriates in the country and the other foreigners as well, if even the locals are not watching. And that is a challenge, because when indigens are not watching their own films, at the end of the day, it's going to cause the cinemas not to want to show, the local films in the capacity or quantum that they ought to show. And it is a challenge across board, perhaps in Africa, where majority of the films by indigens are not even watched by the indigens. And I don't know whether it's a matter of pricing, the ticket pricing, or it's a matter of the fact that the Hollywood films or the foreign films are more entertaining than our local films. I'm not able to put a finger to that, but it is indeed disheartening to see that Kenyans are losing this quantum of money. At least they have been able to clamp down the issue of providing data on their problem. So, with this in mind, they can find a way of solving the problem of losing $2.2 million a day to piracy. And I think at the summit, they came up with a plan as to how Europe and or Berlin, to be specific, and Kenya can come up with a model that can solve the problem. Perhaps the solution being streaming. But in as much as I like the idea of streaming, I still think Africa as a whole, even the Eastern Bloc, that is where Kenya and others are, need to bring about a united front where our cinemas are networked, so that regardless of whether one country is facing this massive challenge, as a whole, we can still be able to generate enough money to, support individual film industries. I mean, I've read stories where even South Africa, one filmmaker in Nigeria is saying that um, Nollywood can pair up with South Africa, the because both industries are thriving. It could be a gold mine, which is true. It is true, but I believe that on that scale, it's not even dreaming big, because Africa as a whole has 1.5 billion, over 1.5 billion citizens. And yes, not every one of those 1.5 billion people will be going to the cinemas to watch it. But even if a fraction of that 1.5 billion are going to cinemas as often as possible to watch movies, you can imagine the amount of money we can generate. So I mean, just two or three countries pairing up together is the starting point, but we should go beyond that number and look at a complete pairing of the African continent, a complete networking of the African continent, even into the diaspora, so that we can generate the needed money to support the industries in Africa. So it is really sad to be breaking the. I mean, recapturing this story. This story came in 2024, and not too long ago, we had an issue in Ghana where we were, you know, and one Nigerian filmmaker was condemning a number of the TV stations which were airing some of the content online. I mean, on their screens. And it is a challenge that even I'm sure the process may take some time, but it looks like some of the TV stations are still not even desisting from showing content by whether foreigners or even the locals. And I hope soon enough that problem will be put to rest so that we can find a proper solution for the industry as a whole. So, yeah, I can empathize with the Kenyan filmmakers who are going through this because indeed it's not pleasant at all. But moving on from Kenya to Hollywood, Hollywood also has its own issues. You remember that just a couple of weeks ago, President Trump came up with the a potential policy when implemented would slap 100% tariff on all foreign productions. And by foreign productions, perhaps they understand we have of it now, since it's still not been a clear, delineated policy, have not really been put in place to explain what foreign means. But foreign productions, in their sense in particular, would mean American films being produced outside America, the country of America, which include even Canada, with 100% tariff. So whatever amount, whatever that means, I do not know. But it also means that even foreign productions that would be airing in America itself, which was not shot in America, would also, be slapped with that fine. And as a result of that, this article sort of um, highlights some of the challenges that California is facing. It's quite a lengthy article, but I hope I can be able to quickly go through it because it's self-explanatory and is very, very powerful to that extent. And it even so in this case, the challenge America have been facing is the fact that it looks like producing films outside America is relatively cheaper than producing it in America per se, and particularly in the state of California. And this article even goes down to explain the number of jobs that they have lost as a result of this. So I'll into it right now. And this article was published in Variety, explaining that California is doubling its film incentive, but it may be too late to stop Runaway productions. Written by Gene Madals. Mad Men was set in the 1960s New York, but it was mostly filmed at a studio just west of downtown Los Angeles. Sienna de Govia was one of the hundreds of people who worked on the show. Someone needed to recreate the food of that era, like savory jellos and the carrots cut into 1-inch cubes that used to be served on airplanes. And that's what she does. She's a food stylist. She started as an assistant 25 years ago, and after learning the craft, became a lead stylist. Los Angeles is full of weird jobs like that, or at least it used to be, but content production peaked in 2022, and the world's entertainment capital has since been battered by a global contraction. The beginning of 2024, everything fell off a cliff. The Govia says, I called all my old mentors and begged to be taken on as an assistant. I never had to do that in 20 years. The lack of work in Hollywood has renewed age old calls for government intervention. Her father, Jack De Govia, was a production designer who worked on Die Hard and Speed. In response to a downturn in 1999, he organized the Film and Television Action Committee, which took aim at runaway production, particularly the then new phenomenon of shooting American films in Canada because it was cheaper. They were taking the bread out of our mouths and attacking our families, says De Govia, now 84. They were making believe that they were making believe they were America. They are not. They are Canada. We were willing to play hardball these days. Begovia led rallies in LA and Sacramento when crews chanted Film American and demanded a state tax incentive to match Canadian subsidies. Sorry. That effort fizzled out, but a generation later, California has a production tax credit and is poised to double it in response to foreign incentives. We have to be more competitive, Gavin Newsom said on May 14th, noting that the business is on life support. That may not be enough. Doubling the program should generate 4,000 to 5,000 jobs, according to state estimates. But in the past 2 years, California has lost 40,000 production jobs, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Trying to be competitive or close to competitive is going to require not only a state effort, but some of federal incentive, says film producer Chris Bender, noting that at least 70 countries have a national subsidy. John Voight, a special ambassador appointed by President Trump, has pitched a national incentive as part of a plan to save Hollywood. The industry has been dreaming about that idea for generations. Ronald Reagan backed a federal tax a federal tax break to counter runaway production when he was governor of California in 1970. 20 years before that, as president of the Screen Actors Guild, he lobbied President Truman on the issue. Runaway production is not new, says Russell Hollander, National Executive Director of the Directors Guild of America. What is different now is that we are experiencing a tremendous global contraction in film and television production. According to DGA data, every major production center, California, New York, Georgia, Canada, and London, has seen a downturn in the past couple of years, but it's been more severe in the US than overseas. Under these circumstances, every job that leaves the United States to chase foreign tax incentives takes on added significance, Hollander says. Recapturing that work has to become an even more important priority. In Canada, production subsidies are a matter of cultural sovereignty. Without them, Canadian movie theaters and TV screens would be overwhelmed by American content. We want to see ourselves reflected on our airwaves as does every other country, says Norm Bolin, former president of the Canadian Media Producers Association. Bolin is skeptical that the US needs a federal subsidy. From a Canadian perspective, that's absurd, he says. Hollywood dominates everywhere. What's the deficiency that needs to be addressed? He also disputes the idea that Canada offering subsidies to international producers caused a loss of US jobs. They weren't really taking jobs away from Americans, he says. They were providing financial resources that allowed these productions to be made. They wouldn't have been made at all. In 1986, Stephen J. Cannell was producing in an LA-based action show for NBC called Stingray, facing declining network fees. He hit on the idea of saving money by filming in Canada. We didn't have much choice, says Michael Dubelko, who was president of Cannell's company. We were a small company. We did it for survival. The company ended up in Vancouver, which had almost no production industry at the time. Cannell turned a former distillery into a TV factory, churning out 21 Jump Street, Wise Guy, The Commish, and other shows. We didn't know that what we were doing when we started. Dubelko says it was crazy. In his view, filming on location in Los Angeles simply become too expensive. Homeowners would demand $5,000 or $10,000 to rent their house for a day. Once the crew got there, a neighbor would fire up the lawnmower and demand to be paid to turn it off. We go to Vancouver and they'd say, "Come on and shoot for free," he recalls. We weren't being ripped off all the time. And with a favorable exchange rate, Dubelko estimates they saved at least $100,000 an episode or more than $2 million a season. Of course, leaving LA behind created more backlash. We took heat for it, he says, but soon others followed. The British Columbia industry now employs thousands of people. Dubelko remembers being in Vancouver with Cannell a few years before he died. We were going down the street and people were stopping us saying, "Oh my God, we are in the business because of you." Belko says it was not one or two, maybe 20 people came up to us and told us how grateful they were to him. He was really the one that pushed all this stuff. He was really a visionary. Lately, Vancouver has been hit hard by the contraction. According to local crew union, only 25% of its members are working. We have been dead, says Tonya Hart, who has worked as a location scout in Vancouver for 28 years. Production levels have been incredibly slow in 2025. Hart knows people who have lost houses and are struggling to afford groceries. Trump's threat to impose 100% tariffs on foreign-made films coming on top of blanket tariffs on Canadian goods and threats of annexation has added to the strain. You can imagine the panic that ripped through our membership, says Crystal Bronworth, business representative of IATSE Local 891 in Vancouver, who fielded at least 50 calls that after Trump's threat. While a movie tariff would probably be unworkable, some worry that US producers and may nevertheless shy away from filming abroad, exacerbating the downturn. This is a global industry, says Spencer Chandra Herbert, BC's Minister of Tourism, Arts and Culture and Sport. He trying to shut the door on it being a global industry misunderstands how the industry works. Canadian-based Gary Lan, an editor whose credits include District 9, Terminator, Dark Fate, says it's not a zero-sum situation. If it's slow in Hollywood, it's slow here. He says we want Hollywood to be busy. When they get so busy, they have trouble finding crew. That's when we tend to get the call. Several in the Vancouver industry agree that the business moves in cycles and they expect the slow period will not last forever. Lam says it's also up to local governments to do what they can to help. I do think that tax breaks and government supports are the way to go, he says. So does the BC government, which recently increased its production incentive. We've made this a priority, Chandra Herbert says. We are responding to the same thing everyone else is. The major studios have reduced how much they are spending. It's been very hard on our workers. Dubelko isn't convinced that a US incentive is a great idea. When he was making TV where there were about 50 shows on the air, they would get Nielsen reports and they all fit on one page. Now there are 500. All this production that currently exists couldn't have been done in one city or one state, he says. The business became very mobile in the mid 80s. It was a very natural evolution that it would start being done outside Los Angeles. Yeah, so that is quite a lengthy article. But then it boils down to the fact that there is a major challenge in the industry in Hollywood and due to the loss of jobs and stuff. And just as he explained, the challenge is bigger than um, just even the tax breaks that other people are facing. Then the quantum or the volume of productions in the US now are far more than it used to be. And so is the population. So what it would mean is that not just Hollywood or Los Angeles have to create those tax incentives to bring back productions to the states. There is perhaps the need for other states in the US to also create intensive incentives that would attract other productions in LA to their states. At least in that case, it means that America as a whole is able to retain majority of their productions in America. But the other issue also may be that if certain productions does not necessarily have to be shot in America but requires foreign touch, it would mean that they would have to move away from America to other countries to do the shoot in. But I can clearly understand why California is doubling down on its incentive to want to, keep productions in Hollywood or in California as a state. And this happened because a lot of foreign countries incentivize their film industry in order to attract foreign production. And by so doing, it brought about a number of foreign productions from Hollywood or even America in general to their countries. countries like Canada, even go to Italy and so many other places, have incentivized their country so much. I mean, their industry so much that it's very attractive and compelling for producers to want to shoot their films in those countries. Australia is one country like that who incentivize their film industry so much that they even encourage co-production where one in one form or the other they're able to give you much tax breaks that helps relieve enough burden for your budget for the films. So Australia have been able to crack the code in attracting a lot of foreign production, particularly from Hollywood. And I think the only way perhaps California would be able to turn the tides around is what they are seeking to do. I mean, from the article, others argue that that may not solve the problem because the volume of productions being done can't be shot in Hollywood alone, which makes sense. But at least they would be able to retain quite a number if their incentives are good enough. And perhaps even individuals are not helping because if they are ripping off these productions by trying to cause havoc for the production so that they can be paid off to stop whatever they are doing, then that is not even helping the state as a whole because as the state gets more money, it helps make the economy better. But aside that, it looks like the government alone can't do this. Perhaps all the trade around that area ought to be, there have to be some price regulations to beat down the cost of living in order to help some of these productions. Because so far as the cost of living in California and places around Hollywood that are high, people without massive budgets can't come there to shoot. That is why perhaps some productions in California may go to Chicago and other places with perhaps cost of productions or even the general cost of living there relatively cheaper than Los Angeles. But I can understand why they would do that because they don't want to lose those jobs, and it does make sense. Every country in the world is trying to find ways and means to beat down the cost so that they can retain majority of those jobs for their own people. So in the light of this, I can perfectly understand, and well, we'll be looking out. I mean, into the coming weeks as to what exactly the incentives may entail, and see how best that may turn the tides in California for their sake. So yeah, this indeed it's exciting times, and then most governments have to do something about their industry. So this sums up my stories for today. I hope you enjoyed yourselves, and thank you for joining me for this very episode 48, 49. I'm even losing accounts of the amount of episodes I'm doing. But thank you so much for joining me for this episode, and I'm looking forward to seeing you tomorrow as well for another exciting episode of the Film Mandate. I'm Papa Otu, and see you tomorrow.